Our special guest in the studio this morning on his final day as Premier, Premier Mike Rann is in the studio. We are taking your calls and your comments. Premier, good morning. You're looking,
good morning. It's great to
looking
be here.
relaxed without the tie.
Very relaxed, and no, I feel good. And got a big day ahead of me. We've got so my last day in Parliament, so I'll be giving a bit of a farewell speech, and so tomorrow morning at about 9 o'clock, I hand in my resignation to the Governor, and I'm going out to lunch. Sasha and I are going out to lunch. So
Be the first long lunch in a long time.
It's going to be a very long lunch.
Can you give us a preview of what you might be saying to Parliament today, and therefore to the people?
I guess, first of all, that it's been the greatest privilege of my life to be Premier of this state. And I guess every Premier who gets sworn in, and there's been 44 of us, and you want to leave your state in better shape than you found it. It's not up for me to judge whether that's been achieved. And you also want to leave your party in better shape than you found it. So one of the things that we've been trying to do right from the start is to demonstrate that you can be pro-government, pro-business, pro-jobs, pro-growth, pro-mining, at the same time be pro-environment and pro-social justice. And also for a Labor government to demonstrate right from the start about that first of all you have to be financially responsible. So it was really about bringing all those things together, being pro-business, pro-environment, pro-social justice at the same time. Whereas in the past people said, oh, that government's pro-business but neglects the environment or social justice or vice versa. So that's basically the tenor of what I'll be saying today.
You probably won't be able to say it in the Parliament, but if you look back, what, from your point of view, are the top two or three best things in your mind, sort of personally as opposed to necessarily on a broader front?
Well, look, people talk about, the world's biggest mine or Australia's biggest defence project. That's not it. I mean, when we were elected, all of the commentators nationally were describing us as a Rust Belt state or a Rust Bucket state. No one does that now. We had to move really hard and fast to diversify the economy, and that's why winning the air warfare destroyers and getting those projects, getting mining going was so important. But much more important than that, people say, what about the hospital? What about the electrified trains and trams? All of those things, or renewable energy. It's not about any of that. It's about, are we more confident as a state in ourselves? Are we more confident about the state's future? And are we now better positioned for greatness rather than being sort of envious about things being better elsewhere? So,
well, on that, and also on your social justice idea of trying to be that amongst other things, how much did the global financial crisis mess that up?
There's absolutely no doubt that, and this is something which I think the Feds deserve a lot of credit as well. The global financial crisis was like a massive attack from the side, none of which was our own doing here in Australia, none of it at all. And so it meant just a huge, huge hit on our state's finances. But the key thing was to keep the ship of state still sailing onwards. And, and as a result of that, we've put 300 million more into mental health. I think David Capo's, did wonderful things in the area of housing, reducing homelessness. One of the key things was that our kids, 9.5 years ago, were just dropping out of school, and we've now got a 16-year high in school retention. That people say, that's just statistics. Well, it isn't. It's about a future. It's about opportunity. It's about kids taking the step up, just as our state is taking the step up.
Premier Rann with us on his last day in the job. You know that your popularity went from the bestest and the mostest in Australia to become in decline. Some of that might have been the GFC and therefore hard decisions and so on. What about the Chantilly effect?
Oh, it obviously has its impact. But ultimately it's about, Don Dunstan taught me a number of things. It's really important to get elected and then re-elected and then re-elected. And, that last election, people said, it was a terrible result. I don't know. Our biggest ever third-term majority Labor, and with a net loss of 2 seats off the biggest victory ever. I'll sort of bank that one. And ultimately that's important in order to keep things going, to embed things. I mean, the election was bitter, not just about the Chantilly or business, but also it was bitter about a fight over whether we could have a new hospital or not. It was fought over issues like the stadium, and ultimately we prevailed. And both of those projects are unstoppable. And I think that's, I guess, my plea to people is this. We've got to stop always caving in as a state to a noisy minority who want to stop anything from happening, any change from happening. So in 5 or 6 years' time, we're going to see a huge revitalisation of our city through the riverbank, all the way from Bowden and that $1 billion development down there right up to Hackney. And I think it's something not to my credit, but to the state's credit. We said we've had enough of the whinges, we're getting on with it.
Premier, rightly or wrongly, I think you'd have to concede that there was a perception about your government being the spin kings.
Oh, well, people can... I mean, in one particular column, I was accused of being a populist and accused of being arrogant and out of touch. Well, you can't be both. So the point of the matter is that you've got to be tough. Don't take no notice of the PR from the Liberals or from Labor or from the advertiser or whatever.
So you weren't spin kings? You didn't try to spin stuff?
Look at the ABS statistics. The ABS statistics, not my statistics, Canberra's statistics, show that the full-time job rate in this state under us is 20 times stronger than it was under the previous 8.5 years of the Liberals. So people can call that spin. Go and complain to the ABS. Ultimately we'll be judged by history on whether we have transformed the state or not. And that's too early to say. But I'll take 20 times the jobs growth of the Liberals any day of the week.
One of the fears is about the future, and you know that many people think that the budget is going to be stretched. We've had another text this morning. You worked on the AAA rating and we'll end up with a AA. They're worried about the cost of the hospital. They're worried about the cost of the desal plant.
I don't know why they'd be worried about the cost of the hospital when it's a fixed price, which we've announced.
But it's a massive cost, and they're worried about that. They're worried about nearly $400 million a year.
Isn't it interesting? The United States lost its AAA credit rating. Great Britain's lost its AAA credit rating, so has Italy. But South Australia not the United States, has maintained a AAA credit rating. That's because we had to fix the finances first, get the economy moving. I remember when Robert de Crespigny walked into my room, shook my hand, and was the head of economic development, and said, "We've just achieved $10 billion worth of projects. We've now got $80 to $100 billion worth of projects going in this state." So ultimately, I'm very relaxed about the fact that I'm going to be doing something else. I've done my best. I take full responsibility for any of the failings of the government, and I give credit to everyone else for the successes.
We'll talk about the successes and failures and what next with the Premier, Mike Rann, who joins us this morning for a few more